viewers, and welcome to another episode of the Doom Loop Dispatch, the news show covering the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm Kevin L. Jones, and with me whenever possible is...
D. Scott Miller.
And today we are honored to have former San Francisco supervisor and the executive director of the Council of Community Housing Organizations, John Avalos. Choo-choo, as he just informed me. Choo-choo. Apparently the Yimbys use it as an insult, but I think it's great. I think that's catchy, you know?
It's got pop. It pops.
Pops.
We've been around for 45 years, so it's a long history of us being around. We've been around longer than the Yimbys. They've had other forms, the urban renewal efforts that were coming down, that were bulldozing our neighborhoods, and now the Yimby movement. The new modern day urban renewal program is Yimby, and it's kind of about settler colonialism.
Yes. Oh man, yeah. Thank you. I have. Oh man, we are kicking it off hot and in exactly the world I want to be in. That is totally. I mean, that is how I feel about it, and I'm so glad you could put it in words for somebody who's dealing with it directly. Now I gotta wonder though, especially with all the changes going on in San Francisco, especially with our new mayor Daniel Lurie. How are you feeling right now about San Francisco politics, John?
I'm actually, there's a lot of work to do to kind of organize progressive forces in San Francisco. I think if you look at San Francisco compared to other cities around the country, we are kind of sitting on our hands while some places are actually responding with boldness that's needed at the moment to reject the fascist takeover of our country. I think there's a belief that we're San Francisco, that we can work things out, that our local institutions that have been the model for other places around the country are going to uphold. But I think that we have to actually tend to our garden as well as we can to make sure that the foundation is strong and understand what the threats are that are happening. I've been trying to focus on immigrant rights and also and how anti-Semitism has been weaponized by the Trump administration, how the drug cartels are now terrorist organizations. Yeah. And then we have, people from Central America who, are only a part of our drug sales that might be on the streets, could be considered terrorists under that definition. Mm-hmm. And I hear that there's efforts to actually start up the Joint Terrorism Task Force of the, that was an alignment between local law enforcement and maybe the FBI. And I think the target actually should be not our immigrant community and transgender people. We should be, if there's any terrorist threat to San Francisco, it's going to come from the January 6ers who have been released and the white supremacists who want to take over our country. I think that's where our intelligence and an anti-terrorism effort should be taking place, and we're all terrorized by that, and we're all terrorized by the idea that people have complete impunity to be a paramilitary organization. And I wonder, if we're actually, I haven't heard anyone think about what are these people going to become? Are they going to be the next Schutzstaffel of the fascists, the SS, paramilitaries, private army that is going to be under the FBI and without any kind of any parameters, but to assault our communities of color and immigrants and uphold the techno-fascist takeover of our country.
That's right.
Yes, you're speaking Scots language for sure. Yeah,
I've been watching like this, like, oh shit, I can't watch. I have to see I have to know how to prepare ourselves, and I haven't really heard anyone talking about, that's a real possibility, and if it's a possibility, we should be thinking about how to protect ourselves from it.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that because like what I was talking about with Kevin in the last episode was how we're going to keep coming back to like white supremacist fascism and white nationalism. Like it's just going to become like the core conversation that we're having. You know what I mean? And as somebody who has been in the legislative process as long as you've been, is there any way that you can track that trajectory? Is there any way that you can actually say, okay, well, it kind of started right about here?
Well, I've been in San Francisco for, 30 years. And then I was in my 20s in the 80s. And we were just hearing in, late 80s about, it was the San Jose Mercury News reporter Webb, who
Gary Webb, good man.
Gary Webb.
Good man.
Who
Shouts to Gary Webb.
did the next part on Iran-Contra that was actually looking like, hey, those planes came back that delivered weapons. They didn't come back empty.
Yep.
And they were actually bringing back, crack cocaine. So, crack cocaine was under the drug war, or the war on drugs that was reinstigated under Reagan and under H.W. Bush. President H.W. Bush was really going after the inner cities and the Black and brown communities, most of the Black community. And there were a lot of policies that were put in place to increase sentencing against Black people. This was all, well documented in the book, The New Jim Crow, that had come out, that resulted in, okay, we don't have to necessarily be, we can create policies and laws that actually the impact will be ensuring that the pathway to, to a person's who's Black's future is through the prison system. And, breaking the, creating like a school to prison pipeline, failed schools, and increased incarceration for those who the school system is failing. That was kind of what I saw, coming. And there are very systematic things. It's U.S. militarism. It's imperialism. It's the use of narcotics to actually create covert operations. It's to actually move those onto our own communities. And there's like, no one really sees it going on because they're covert. And the people who actually discuss that are considered to be outside the mainstream of even the San Jose Mercury News, and could actually, be offed. They reported on this. So there's like it's really hard to see all these connections, but you see the impacts, you see the laws that are made. One of the architects of increase, of the new war on drugs that was in the early 90s, and I forget what the national legislation was, but it was basically criminalizing street sales and ensuring that people of color were going to be locked up. Was Joe Biden?
Yep. The super predator thing, right? Was that him? Yeah. Or no, was that Clinton? Sorry. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, and Clinton was the president at the time. Joe Biden was the dutiful
senator,
person.
Well, I will have to. Can I interject real quick though?
Yeah.
Okay, growing up in that era and as being the person who was actually being targeted by that legislation, see Dolores Tucker and the Black Congressional Congress, they backed that bill.
Oh,
no, a lot of people don't know this. Like, I want to inject that. But I agree with what you're saying. I agree that really is a really good weather vane.
Yeah.
Like that's a great weather vane. But when we decided what we were going to do is as leftists, quote unquote, right? When we decided what we were going to do is we're going to go along with these kind of like the way the right defines our issues.
Yeah.
Like the right defined our issue like that. You know what I mean? And I agree. I mean, maybe if we had actually given some real pushback against their defining our issues.
Yeah.
Right there, like Iran-Contra. Right, you guys actually broke the law.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's so crazy, but you're right though. I just want to highlight that. I
Yeah.
think you're absolutely right. I think Iran Contra is what we lost our way.
Yeah.
And the whole Reagan neoliberal, neoliberal effort was all part of that. How do you gut, the health and human services, housing, other thing, education. All we saw a retraction of funding for those programs that were actually not more than the safety net. They were actually the tools that people could access to actually find opportunity and self promotion for their, not just themselves and their families, but their communities.
Right on.
In California, probably Prop 13 was a big start of all of that, where basically when we were able to achieve integration of communities, it was kind of like a rejection, like, well, we don't want our tax dollars serving, people of color. So we're going to vote against it. That was the underlying thing, or the impact was that we saw a lot of people going to private school and getting private, education. We saw a diminishment of funding for public education, and you could go to UC school for like $35 a unit or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Less than that. I mean, I went to UC school, UC Santa Barbara, and my last quarter, 10 weeks, I paid $442 for a quarter. That was it.
Wow.
And my daughter goes there now, and it's not like crazy unaffordable. It's expensive, but it's not that.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got some good financial aid that she'd be able to get. So then we saw that what I saw like coming up in San Francisco at the end of the 2000s, because of whatever the bill was called, we saw the prison population across the United States grow to 2 million people by the year 2000. It was the most incarcerated people of any country had in the whole world, was 2 million people, mostly people of color. Probably a larger part of the people of color were Black.
Yeah.
And there was a revolt against that. And there's been really good, tension about how we fight against the carceral system. And in San Francisco, there was some really great work that was done in the late 90s to actually put, especially for juvenile hall, to put systems in place to prevent young people from getting, incarcerated in the first place. And they can get community support, they can get, case management, help them like make better choices, or to provide great opportunities and community work. I saw it change like hundreds of lives around.
Mm-hmm.
And, it actually was remarkable. And it actually, they reduced, like we had an incarceration rate in the juvenile hall, maybe 97, 96. It was about 150, sometimes 165. That got reduced down in more recent years, in the early 2000s, down to like 35, 25. And it's been kind of that low ever since, because we were putting the right reforms in place. Those reforms resulted in Chesa Boudin, actually having a platform, and it was a national platform, but we had already had the local experience that proved that preventing incarceration makes our communities safer.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. But I thought progressive policies were destroying our cities.
Yeah. We get back to white supremacy again.
Yeah.
Once again, we're back at the thing.
Yeah. And I would just like to add the one I found, the Violent Crime Control Act of 1991 with Biden was co-signed with Strom Thurmond. So Biden worked with.
It was probably 101 at that time too.
Yeah, exactly. Still talking about Peckerwood.
Yeah, but he also had Black children. So I think we don't want to get into Strom too much. He's the whole episode by himself.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, man. But yeah, so speaking of white supremacy, you were involved with the expanding of the sanctuary city protections in San Francisco. Are you worried now, especially with Trump in power, that those are in danger? And especially with somebody as weak and kind of self-serving as Lurie in charge as well?
I think there's strong support all around from community groups, labor, residents, a scattering of a majority of the board of supervisors, the mayor, the city departments. I think that we have to. I'm in the process of trying to assess where the threats to it are. They're not coming from City Hall, but they are coming from outside of City Hall, and I'm concerned that they could be coming from law enforcement, and we have to make sure that they're not. And it wouldn't be coming from the law enforcement. It wouldn't be coming from like the actual, police department or the sheriff's department, or it would be coming from like maybe the POA, the Police Officers Association, which I hear could be involved. I haven't verified it, so it's just a rumor, but I heard that they could be asking for, Joint Terrorism Task Force reestablishment of that, probably for the wrong reasons. And I also hear that there's some push for breaking our sanctuary policy sub-policy, which is the due process for all ordinance and sanctuary policy, to allow coordination between the PD and the police department and ICE over drug sales in the Tenderloin. So I know Supervisor Dorsey has floated the idea of deportation automatically for that. The way we had set up our due process for all ordinance, due process meaning that if you get caught, you're an immigrant and you get into the justice system, you don't even get cited, or there's no possibility of any interaction with ICE unless there's probable cause, and you can't even get like transferred over to ICE in any way whatsoever unless you've committed a serious crime and you've done your time. So and there's no communication that the city or the sheriff or at the state of California passed a similar law that the state prison system can do with ICE either. So there are real barriers to do that. But they want to make amendments and change that. So we have to assess what's real. Are they doing it, and work to build the power against that, coming forward and passing.
Yeah. It sounds like a really great excuse to increase the police budget if they get this work together going.
Well, did you see just recently that that the police budget, the police staffing level is at the lowest it's ever been?
Yeah, and crime is still down.
Crime is still down. So,
funny, I know. Yeah, well, where's this thing called correlation? I wonder.
Yeah, and it's like, I grew up. Well, I was on the board of supervisors, and I was a legislative aide at City Hall, and our police staffing was 1,971 police officers that are on the street. That was considered full staffing. And so that law was established, I think it was Prop D in 1994. And then it wasn't until 2009 that they hit that number for the first time. And it was when the city had the worst budget deficit up to that time. And I was the chair of the budget committee. And in previous years, despite not being at that level, we were able to cut police academy classes, because that was a source of funding to be able to have crime prevention services and job opportunities and housing. And so we were able to move money from that into actual real interventions to get to the root cause of, why people, might, enter illicit activity. So, so that was very successful in my mind. And that year in 2009, when we hit that number, I was able to get community policing, the officers to be on the streets, walking and be on bikes, actually building relationships with residents rather than, being in their cars and not having that
being an occupying
connection.
Yeah. Like the difference between an occupying force and a part of the community.
Yeah. Well, that was the notion, because people always felt like they were an occupying force, and there was never time to actually help, to build, kind of the relationships that are really needed.
Right on.
You know, during the pandemic, after the reaction to George Floyd, that was a real peak moment in San Francisco where, you know, everyone everywhere had Black Lives Matter signs, you know, up all over the place. Not everyone, but they were like so everywhere. They were so prolific. And I heard like there were some businesses that were doing it so that no one would fuck with them, right?
Right.
But I also know that there were people really earnest about it. I was part of this march that started like on Frida Kahlo Way by City College, and Ocean Avenue. There was probably like 1,000 people. Most were white, and there were families, and it was all Black Lives Matter. And it was the most amazing thing that I saw. That to me was the peak. It was like June or July of 2020.
Yeah, it was after May, because May was the big one, so it had to be June. It had to be around June.
Oh yeah, it wasn't as big as the big one.
Yeah, the big one was in May. It was May Day. That was May Day. Yes, it had to be June.
So, but it was the peak because it kept expanding, and there was more organicness to it happening all over the country. But then we saw there was a backlash that happened, right? In August, you saw that there were paramilitaries on the street in Portland, Oregon. You had the kid that shot someone in
Rittenhouse. Yeah.
Rittenhouse. And then you started seeing that there was this whole effort to start funding, you know, the opposition. The next year was when we started seeing that the people wanted to fund recalls.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That connection is so important. Nobody even talks about that. The connection between the white supremacist backlash against George Floyd and the rise of tech fascism and recalls. That is very real.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where we saw it happening. And in San Francisco, I think because we had these moments where we had all these people of all walks of life, mostly public school families, that you saw a lot, the greater integration of like in our public schools up until that time. You saw that there was a real like moment where, hey, we're building a more, you know, egalitarian society. It was also year that, you know, there was opposition to Trump, so that the anti-Trump was also reframing, no, we're not that, we're this, we're about love. But then that was short-lived, because I think that experience of people of all walks of life, like asserting their rights, and standing in solidarity with Black people, even if it was fleeting, was a huge threat. And they said, no, we got to do something about San Francisco. And it was like, who was it? Obendorf, who was like some kind of billionaire funding, you know, the recall and the
school recalls. That's what he was doing for sure.
Yeah. Gary Tan, David Sachs. They all came out.
Yeah. And the police unions, of course. Yeah. Brutal. Well, you know, it's funny though. You bring up the recalls, and it's, you know, you were a part of that kind of. I mean, of that, I would say you almost were passed on the mantle of being a progressive supervisor from Chris Daly, who, you know, I want to say he was kind of the first kind of was like, oh, I agree with these guys' politics, but I don't get why so many people hate him. Like, there's this hatred for Chris Daly, which I did not understand. And, you know, it just seemed like there's always this hatred, you know, for the guys actually really trying to work to, you know, to take down the status quo and think about the little people. And now it seems like they got a bunch more money behind them, the people that, like, you know, want to take these folks down now. So that being said, do you think, I mean, if these recalls were asked today, do you think you and Chris would have been recalled?
Well, in order for the recalls to be around, there has to be enough effort to do the recall. And like when I was chair of the budget committee, I was trying to cut the police budget to actually move to Health and Human Services and the fire budget. And I was looking at fat that was in the fire department. There's a lot of fat there. There was then, not so much now. And people wanted to recall me, you know? So I had this really great photo of like, you know, this rally that was recall Avalos across from City Hall. We had taken, you we had taken part of the budget. It was the interim part of the budget, not the real budget, but it was the budget to do work for the city. And we had cut $80 million from police and fire, and we moved $80 million over to Health and Human Services in the month of June. And they tried to like jam up City Hall. And we had our people that were, labor and community groups in the hundreds, had a line sneaking through the hallway in City Hall. They had public comment first, and the police and firefighters thought they could just jump the line because they're police and firefighters. So they're banging on the oak doors of the board chambers and demanding to get in. And the people in the hall are saying, they're saying, let us in, let us in. The people in the hall are saying, get in line, get in line. And we beat them back that day. But they
kick ass.
Part of that was the recall.
That's so kick ass, though. Let me just take a minute and say how kick ass that is. Right. We can move on. That's kick ass, though.
Well, it was. I came out of community organizing and community work. Education, social work. Trying to stop the prison industrial complex. So that was my perspective going into City Hall, and I wanted to keep that perspective. And so I'm at City Hall setting up the ways that people can mobilize and pinpoint, and I become the target. Like that's what I am. I'm the target, but I'm also one who has access to like other colleagues that can make something happen. And we were able to do that with the budget. But I'm in the board chamber when they're banging on the door, and my heart's palpitating. I'm sweating and I'm breathing hard because it's like fucking crazy. The next morning I come to the next in January, we start the new year in 2010, and my legislative aide says to me, the first day I'm back, and the first minute I'm back, something about the police budget, and I grab my heart. I'm like, fuck. And I spent the night in the hospital getting assessed for, it's like, it's very traumatic work.
Yeah,
that's brutal.
Wow.
But you can't be powerful. You can't get stuff done without the outside of City Hall, without a movement to back it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm concerned about right now, is that in San Francisco, where we had these long histories of people's movements that were able to, elect the class of 2000 that was independent of Willie Brown in that year, to get elect my class of the Board of Supervisors, and to get like all kinds of stuff done around affordable housing and changes in the police staffing and how that works. Like that took a lot of movement building and movement work. And so to deal with like accountability around San Francisco to live up to our values at this moment means that we have to actually have a movement to help ensure that happens. And without it, it might be easy to get rolled over by the Trump administration.
Real talk.
The power of the purse strings are greater than we ever imagined, because we didn't think Elon Musk would have total control of them.
Yeah.
Which he does right now.
He does.
Yeah. But then it's funny. It's kind of in a way, too. It's like Elon Musk was like, he's almost like Ron Conway with Ed Lee, the kind of inserting himself in. And to me, and I want to know your opinion on this, was Ron Conway inserting himself in San Francisco politics kind of the beginning of the end?
Yeah, probably. I mean, if Ron Conway was one of the architects of the Twitter tax break, the mid-market tax break.
Yep.
I think that and if we were to stimulate downtown again, we would probably, with the same policies are in place, tax breaks, got the real estate transfer tax. I think that year that we got to see who Ron Conway was certainly where we saw a real change in who had ascendancy in the ruling class in San Francisco. Before it was old money, real estate, the Gap, Fisher family, and then it became like the tech bros, right?
Right.
That's the start of it. And he was just an angel investor. But then you had, who was the guy who was was it Dorsey? His name was Dorsey, who was with Twitter at the time. So he was part of
yes.
it. Zuck was just coming on, and he hadn't gone public yet with Facebook. But he was starting to, we were starting to see the Twitter tax break stimulated a lot of movement of people into the downtown area. And we started seeing like a whole change in population that was displacing residents with people who have higher incomes to be able to work in the tech industry. The Twitter tax break was to actually stimulate job growth. And I voted against it.
Of course.
Because that was during the first .com era, where we first had, based on no products that were providing any real substance, we had this, this speculative boom that brought in a whole, wave of displacement and wealthier, interests whose economy crashed the economy, who lost all their jobs, and we saw San Francisco resettle back into its analog days.
Right. I remember that.
But then when the Twitter thing was happening, we had the experience of the .com boom. We knew what it was going to rot on the city. And I voted against it. My statement was that, it's going to, increase greater disparities in wealth. And, how much wealth do you really need? And it's not just the haves and the have-nots. There's the have-mores and the have almost everything. That's still want more.
Exactly.
And that's what they were able to achieve. They got the greatest concentration of wealth, probably in the world history, that happened here in San Francisco. We may have gone from like 15 billionaires to
100 or something. Yeah.
I heard 87.
Too damn many. How about too damn many?
Yeah, that's for sure. One is too
and now they have under control. And that's the thing. I think why San Francisco is so everyone's sitting on their hands at this moment, where other cities you see are actually on the streets, is that we have a capital of tech industry here in San Francisco. And people see that in order for them to rise to office, they need to actually court that money.
Capitulate. But I do want to ask you a question around this, because this is the second time you said this. What cities are doing it right?
I don't see anyone doing it as well as they should be, and certainly not the Democratic National Committee. But there's been activities in New York. We see Chicago, LA. They stopped traffic on the 101. There was an action of the Treasury today that Indivisible, started. So we're seeing activities that are going on, and usually San Francisco is one of those places that's leading that effort, and we're not seeing that at all.
I agree. I just want to know what cities, like, who do we look to for assistance? Who do we look to for inspiration? Like, I hear you.
Well, we all have to look to ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Right.
We all have to look to ourselves, and I'm just trying to assess, like, what is happening.
Well, and it's so true about the Twitter tax break, especially too. I remember I was working at KTVU at the time, and I remember not only were we reporting on these stories of like artists who had been living for decades thinking they were going to die in their rent control apartments, getting these new landlords that were just vicious. You had the people that were like just every day bothering the these people, just like usually senior citizens and stuff like that, forcing them out, just harassing them until they left. Right. And you had so many stories of that. And then at that same time too, you start seeing the surveys, the artist surveys, and seeing how many of them were forced to leave because they just couldn't afford it anymore. And it was like not long. I mean, really, like a couple years after the Twitter tax break passed.
And there was so much, it was supposed to like clean up mid-market. I was legislative aide for Chris Daly, so I was responsible for the mid-market area. And it didn't make any difference in like the amount of poverty that you saw in mid-market. And in fact, it only got worse with heroin and fentanyl boom that happened. I was already seeing heroin like being much more prominent. I mean, crack had already been, there was a lull up after, crack subsided. It was still around, but then heroin kind of came on around 2015. And then fentanyl was on the East Coast and then didn't get to here till about 2017 or 2018. And then it's just been a nightmare since. That was all happening when the economy was booming like gangbusters. We had about 10 years of super growth in San Francisco that was just, bringing in wealthier people and then concentrating so much wealth in the smaller and fewer hands. And I say smaller because they probably weren't very, big down below. So,
Hey-o!
hence the need to, strike it rich.
And so we had another gold rush with a bunch of incompetence, and they took the money and ran. So we're kind of like stuck with the empty bag right now. That's great.
And I don't know what it is that. So we talked about YIMBYs at the beginning. Like I work in affordable housing, and I've always been involved. My community work hasn't always been in affordable housing, but I've been working at youth development and anti-incarceration and education work, and but housing was always like the fundamental thing. And I was on the board of supervisors, and how do we build more affordable housing? How do we build the resources for that? And that's always been my obsession, is like, how do we create those public resources? And now with the YIMBY movement, it's all about how do we actually build housing. And they don't think about the constituency of people who are living with housing insecurity, people who are just one paycheck away from the street, people who are crammed into, multiple generations into a house. That's the experience of most people in San Francisco, and they're not the constituency that policymakers listen to when it comes to, promoting housing development. They listen to people who want to make a profit off it, who only see the only way we can build, housing that's affordable for working people is to make a profit off of it. And that's what we're chasing, and that's what the YIMBY movement is representing. And so they're speaking about building housing when they're actually fairly comfortable with their housing situation, for the most part, right? Why isn't it the people who most impacted are the ones who are shaping what our city's approach should be, or what our nation's approach should be?
Right on.
Why are we still fighting for Medicare for all and for public education, and like it's all being taken from us by in the most crass way at this moment by the fascist technocrats.
Fascist technocrats. Can we say that over and over and over again? Fascist technocrats. I mean, and unfortunately, San Francisco created these guys. I mean, we gave them a permission structure. I still don't know how we managed to do that.
So who was the guy? Sam Altman, who did TechCrunch. So in October of this year, he had a TechCrunch conference. The whole thing, it said like, welcome, disrupt on the Moscone Center. One side said welcome, one side said disrupt. And it was this whole thing about disrupt, which is basically about trying to find the loopholes in the law that you could exploit to make a profit for yourself. That was actually ignoring how do you build like better communities? How do you create more safety for transit and traffic on our streets? How do you provide better education? It was all like, how can we chisel in and get some money out of this and fuck everyone else? That's the ethos that they're working with. And that's what, the MAGA movement has bought into, not because they think that that's the right way. They don't see it. They don't ignore it because they're more obsessed with like white, how do we assure that, white people can be on top of things in this country? And Christian nationalists.
Exactly. I mean, but I do appreciate like you being able to highlight how we've incrementally found ourselves here. Like there've always been people who've incrementally fighting against it, but the thing has also been incrementally growing at least since 2009. So I mean, like the oversight. So how do you think that we can? I don't know, man. As local activists, as local journalists, as people who are hyper local, who are just trying to protect their own communities and their neighborhoods, and also by extension the country. I mean, what do you think? What do you think the average everyday resistor can do?
Great question.
Yeah, I actually think that we should be meeting in person and talking to one another and thinking about big actions that we can take. I love the organic thing about un día sin inmigrantes, or one day without Mexican, a day without a Mexican.
Right.
Tomorrow we're staying at Sacramento.
Right.
There's every state capital is going to be flooded with people tomorrow. These are the things that we should be doing. We should be in the streets shutting it down. We should be surrounding the Supreme Court. I actually think that if we don't do that, we're not going to have the country. And I find myself saying this and thinking that the same words that Donald Trump said on January 6th to instigate his insurrectionists. But his whole idea of not having a country was not being able to be in charge of the country the way he is right now. But for us, it's like, how do we actually create, what our dream of what our country was supposed to be, what we fought for, for centuries to be able to create. And that has, slipped our hands right now. And it feels like to achieve that back feels really daunting. And I think people have to understand. I heard something the other day, like, we have to have hope, and sometimes you have to like find it within yourself to make it happen. To find that hope, you have to, not despair, right? It's so easy to go that way, and I'm victim of that myself. But I actually feel like so long as that people are oppressed, you're going to see people fighting back.
That's right.
And until like people are no longer oppressed, then there'll be no need to fight back. And I just think that's just the dynamics of dialectical dynamics that has to happen. So
that word dialectical dynamics, I love that. That's all. That's one point.
Yeah, totally. Now you worked with Newsom. I mean, I think you were you were definitely in office when he was in mayor. How do you feel about him being the point of resistance for California? Do you think he can actually stand up to Trump? Do you have any belief that he'll do what he should do in order to protect the most vulnerable in our state?
No, not the most vulnerable. I mean, he's going to, he's going to respond to like the fires in LA and the natural disasters, and he's going to call upon what every state should be able to get without any strings attached to be able to support our people. But no, he's closely tied. I was thinking today, he's very closely tied to the tech bros, right? So how does but they get more out of Trump than they get out of him. So I think he's still going to try and court that. It seems like the Democrats aren't really switching up very much, who they court for, re-election. I'm getting requests for money from, the Democratic Party all the time. And like, why are you asking for money? Tell me your fucking plan.
Yeah.
I already gave you some money last year, and I stopped giving you money because you had no fucking plan to win. And I stopped giving you money.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised that you didn't win because people actually didn't believe in you anymore. And I'm a member of the Democratic Party. I'm an elected member of the Democratic County Central Committee. So I see Gavin Newsom as really looking at how he can position himself personally to actually be the one to like lead the nation. But he's not looking at what were the mistakes the Democratic Party had made that we're going to bring people back to believe in the party again, that would want to, back him with a platform that is about, environmental justice, housing that's not, supply side, build all the housing for rich people and there'll be a trickle for everyone else. Immigrant rights, healthcare. He was supposed to, I worked at a union that actually endorsed him because he promised back in 2018 or it was 2017, made the promise that he was going to have Medicare for all in California, and he never did it. Yep. So his promises are like, don't mean a thing. He's just out for himself. But if he wants to like shift and unite people around what we need to survive and actually look generations ahead of what it's going to take to have a city that have a country that can live that long, I'm willing to open my eyes to that, but I don't see him, making that change, and he hasn't. Yeah. He's just always, just trying to lead by before. Like right now, Trump leads by tweet, and Gavin Newsom, when he was mayor, and probably still now, is leading by press release and performative actions rather than really changing the systems that are holding people back and holding people down.
Yeah, well, it's just a system that he benefited from too. These are all his buddies, you know.
It's not, he's Plump Jack, okay? He's
Plump Jack. Right.
He's Plump Jack. Come on now.
He's also Getty.
Yeah.
Oh, he is Getty.
That's right.
Can't be forgotten.
Yeah. A family with a great reputation. but yeah, I was wondering, and that also, you know, after seeing that whole shot of him, you know, throwing away that homeless person's possessions, you know, like trying to, I mean, he's definitely on the wrong side of this homeless issue, which is just going to get worse.
And he always has been since Care Not Cash.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. And the making it the sit lie law, was that under him too?
That was under him. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Another terrible one. Yeah, yeah. He's never been a friend to the unhoused, has he?
You cannot run for president without being an appeasement person.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I mean, like the minute that you start looking at that White House, you're appeasing. And what you're going to appease is corporate America, and what you're going to appease is white supremacy, and what you're going to appease are the tech bros, right? You call yourself a unifier, but all you're actually doing is just putting yourself up for sale.
Right? Or it'd also be a military, you know, with the fossil fuel industry and military, military industrial complex and imperialism.
Exactly.
When it was maybe November of 2023, like he took a trip to, maybe it was just last year, while the genocide was raging, and still is, in Gaza. He went to China to go show like how tough he is over there, and how he can work internationally. And then he went to Israel to meet with Herzog. And also, it's important to know that Scott Wiener went to Israel as well to meet with President Herzog. I don't think he met with Netanyahu. I don't think that would have flown very well. But Herzog isn't very different, I'm sure. They want to show that they're willing to support the ruling class when it comes to U.S. imperialism and relationships with Israel, which is a foreign nation. I heard that Scott Wiener was working to it was rumors, but I actually believe they're true, that he was working to annul ethnic studies classes around the state of California for teaching a balanced approach to what is, to a very unbalanced situation in Israel and Palestine.
I can see that. I can see that because the ethnic studies program in San Francisco, especially at San Francisco State, is the locus. It's the first place it happened. So if you're going to try to stop a curriculum from going nationally, you start here. So I'm not surprised at all.
And you see also like. I think the doctors, have you seen what's happened to the doctors at UC San Francisco who have been asserting their right to wear pins that express solidarity, and they've been told to take them off, and they feel silenced. The university has taken a position that is not discussing, how doctors and healthcare workers are being killed while they are treating people who are being shot and killed in the genocide in Gaza. Like, that whole thing he's protecting. So at the same time, he is, uniting San Franciscans around supporting transgender youth. So he becomes a hero for the transgender community while he is participating and propagating a genocide in Israel. And so we have to make these connections so that we can actually, work to hold these people accountable for actually representing all of us, and not just the people they choose who represent their interests and the ruling class.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we actually had an exchange last week about the fragmentation of solidarity.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow!
Right, like the way that they choose for us who we should be putting our sympathy towards, when in fact we should be putting our sympathy towards all oppressed peoples all over the world.
Yeah.
Right. But they choose for us. Okay. So the trans people are over here, and the Palestinians are over here, and the Black people are over here, and the immigrants are over here. But they get a chance to actually choose who we show solidarity to week by week.
Yeah.
Instead of actually having a gestalt understanding that their struggle is our struggle, is our struggle, is our struggle.
So last year when I spoke out about the genocide raging in Gaza. I was really concerned that, we had so many elected officials, wannabe federal elected officials, wannabe state officials, and actual Pelosi and, elected officials who were ignoring and saying that if you were, for Gaza, you were actually being, twisted by the Chinese, propaganda, and you're tools of the Chinese, So I actually thought that, well, we're not getting anything from them, so it makes sense that we should be confronting them wherever they are, so that they understand what they are committing with our tax dollars. And I had tweeted something about that last year, and it was attached to a Jewish Community Relations Council. They do these mashups that actually show anyone who's speaking out in support of a ceasefire. They would show the people that were, saying things that were actually could be construed as anti-Semitic or was outright anti-Semitic, and that was representative of anyone who was for a ceasefire. When there was thousands of people that were, speaking that were not at all in that, speaking in that way. I didn't see this video that they had mashed up together, but I saw it was protecting Scott Wiener, and I said, never again means never again for anyone. The same indifference that allowed the killing of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust should not play out again for anybody anywhere. He was upset because the video that I had there had something that could have been construed as anti-Semitic that someone said to him when they were confronting him, and he actually instigated a few calls to my board of directors and tried to get me fired.
Wow.
And then we go to a community meeting on where the community's rallying together to support immigrants in the mission and in San Francisco, and he's been invited to this meeting. And I actually was wondering, like, how come I didn't hear about this meeting? And the word didn't get around as all these organizations that I'm part of. It seemed really on the down low. And I went to the meeting, and in the middle of it, he comes and he makes a beeline right to me, and he walks up to me and he smiles at me and he shakes my hand and he says, "Hello, John." And I'm like, he only did that so that he can be next to me because I represent the community more than he does.
Oh.
And to give him legitimacy for being in the room.
He did that Photoshop. He did the photo op shake hand with you.
Yeah.
I've had that. I've experienced that. Somebody just rolls up on you and does the photo op shake hand. Like, hey, good for you, click. And then they go away.
Oh, he and John are friends, so he must be okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's the photo op shake hand. I've had that happen to me. It's the worst. It's the worst.
Awful, man. Okay. He's like,
the same thing happened last year. The Harvey Milk Democratic Club, LGBTQ Democratic Club, was doing their candidate forum, and in the room, I was sitting right in the aisle. So anyone who was going to be a candidate had to walk up past me. And Mark Farrell comes in the room. It's his turn to go up. And I hadn't talked to Mark Farrell since 2016, when he was basically putting the sit-lie, the 10 encampments, criminalizing 10 encampments on the ballot. And I refused to support him. And he gave this speech about how much he cares about homeless people. We can't let them live this way. And I said, yeah, sanctimony is a refuge of scoundrels, I said. And I got reprimanded at the board for it.
What was telling the truth?
and he hadn't talked to me in since. And he never talked to me until he actually saw me in the aisle. And then he grabs my hand and starts shaking it and smiling at me so pleasantly when he refused to talk to me since all that time, since that moment. And I shared maybe 6 more months with him on the board of supervisors, after that. It was like a trip.
Yeah, he's got it in his file of you guys shaking hands.
Exactly. Next thing you know,
everyone who was there saw that. Oh, you're friends with John Avalos, so you can't be that bad.
Yeah,
exactly. It's in his file.
Next thing you somehow that picture makes it onto a mailer. Like,
exactly.
Love Mark Farrell.
Everybody loves Farrell.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is the world that elected officials in San Francisco live in. There's so much pressure on you to sign on the dotted line, to sign the papers, to give your consent to who gets to be in charge of things. And when you give your consent, you can rise politically, right? And I never gave my consent. So
yeah, there we go, man.
But there's other people who can, join in with Jackie Fielders and, the Dean Prestons and, who can do that. And I think, you talk about what's the situation like at City Hall right now. Like I believe Jackie Fielder has a really strong plan that she wants to implement, but she also knows she has to play the game. And I see her as being someone who can play the game, but not give up the goods, and can still stay true to what her mission is. Like, we need people like that. We need movement people to be on the board or to be elected officials, so they can tap into the energy that comes from the grassroots to really make the change that we need and ensure that our governments are accountable and work on the things that everyday people need, which is the basics: healthcare, education, transit, a world we can live in future years. And
exactly. And you just got to work fast, like Dean Preston. Get as much as you can before they attack you and get you out. That's at least we got that affordable housing and where that crappy McDonald's used to be. I mean,
oh my God, yeah. It's funny because I actually really like that McDonald's was replaced, because there was a McDonald's on Ocean Avenue in my district that is a parking lot for idling cars going through to do their orders. And I want housing to be there, and I couldn't get anyone interested in that, and to make it happen there. And after it got done, there were so many people complaining about that building, right? And I actually have a problem with a building that's 100% affordable, that's 8 stories tall. Let's make more of those.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Especially the affordable thing is the biggest. But of course, what I heard too, like my brother-in-law, basically, like, he's pretty centrist, and he'll parrot any kind of centrist talking point he hears. So of course he was like, yeah, I've been hearing that people really don't like the new residents moving into the affordable, the affordable housing there. And it's like, oh, do you have you heard this?
I've got issues with
no one's moved in there yet.
There's nobody in there yet.
Exactly. Just
they got a whole other year to do all the fixtures.
Oh my God.
It's gonna be a while.
It's just never going to end, though.
Well, Amir Baraka said this is the struggle that has to be. I've been repeating that to myself over and over again. Amir Baraka was one of my mentors, and one of the last things he ever said. Yeah, and one of the last things he ever said to me, he said, "No matter what happens, this is the struggle that has to be." Yeah. It's just but they're never going to relent. But should we relent because they're never going to relent? This is just the struggle that has to be,
Yeah.
It's the dialectical nature of it all.
It's the dialectical nature. Hey, man, I'm getting ready to have to bounce. It's been an hour. I got to go cook my family some food.
Totally understand.
I got one too. But
okay.
It's a pleasure talking.
Yeah, this is
Thank you, John.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much, John.
Really
hopefully we can get you on again too. Seriously.
Yeah, we're thinking about round tabling. We're going to round table. We're actually going to do this.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Great to get you in
fun.
person. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
So, Doom Loopers, thank you again for tuning in. Please check us out on all the socials. We're on the X, we're on the TikTok, all that fun stuff. And please support our Patreon. We could always use the support to pay our bills, just to stream. We lose money making this, so hopefully you want to help us at least break even.
It's a labor of love. Help us out, man. Come on.
Exactly. And until next week,
keep fighting the good fight.
Keep fighting the good fight. Bye, John.